Hello and welcome to the Workplace eProcurement webinar. These are weekly webinars that we conduct that provide a high-level overview of our application to look at requisitioning, approval of requisitions, creation of POs, receiving, invoice matching, and other components that are involved within those pieces and parts as well. These are designed to be high-level overviews to give you an idea of what the product can do, what the product looks like. There are many different interfaces that we offer. Some of those interfaces are specific to a certain back office, financial, or ERP system. So this webinar does not focus on those simply because of the timing constraints that we're within. If you do want a one-on-one webinar where we can get specific to your environment and look at your specific needs, then you're welcome to contact us to schedule that, and we'll be glad to walk through those types of demos with you. With that, we'll go ahead and get started and walk through the demonstration. Workplace is a web-based application. All of the users that log in do so via their browser. There's my address bar and URL that I'm logging into up at the top of the screen. I'll enter my username and password. Now I'm using SQL Server authentication on my image here. We also support NT authentication via Active Directory for single sign-on purposes. So if you're using NT authentication in your environment, that is supported for logging in. If you've got multiple companies set up, then you can select or change the company and log into the appropriate company. We also do have a Workplace Enterprise product that will work with intercompany and multi-company as well. If you need different translations, there are different translations available of the product, and those translations can be selected by the user when they log in, and it'll remember that selection for the next time that the user logs in. And then once that information is entered, click on Login, and you'll now log in to the Workplace application. When you log into Workplace, you start off on the My Workplace tab, and the functionality that shows up here is based upon what we've allowed this user to do from their setup within Workplace security. Our users do not typically need to be concurrent users of your back office, financial, or ERP system. And in the majority of cases, we do not take up any type of user license. On those rare occasions where we do, it is typically a light user, and that is much less expensive than your typical user licenses that you might encounter with a back office system. But the important thing to note is that we have the functionality assigned to this user based upon their setup within Workplace security, and FOI, which is the user we're logged in as, has the ability to requisition and also has the ability to receive. So we break out that different type of functionality onto different tabs. That way, as soon as you log in, you can immediately go to the area that you want to work in, and we also leave ourselves plenty of real estate on the screen for additional information and additional details. So we're going to start off with requisitioning, and the first thing you see on the requisition tab are some icons for different vendors. We have the concept of being able to use catalogs to generate requisitions. There are internal catalogs and there are external catalogs that allow you to punch out to a vendor's website. We'll go through both of those examples here in just a few minutes, but if you're using catalogs, as soon as you log in, you can immediately begin using that experience to generate your requisitions. You also see open requisitions here. Open requisitions are active requisitions for this user. So if there is any one line on the requisition that has not been fully processed, you're going to see the open requisition here. You'll see the name of the requisition, and if different lines have different statuses, you'll be able to see where those lines are within the requisition. If lines are waiting for approval, you'll see who they're waiting for approval from, and that's a quick status within this dashboard of where your active requisitions are. If you want more details on any of these requisitions, click on it, open it up, and there's additional information and additional details that can be viewed. You've also got the ability to find requisitions. You can always go back in and find previous requisitions to see where they are in the process, what has happened to them, what needs to happen to them as they're flowing through each of the different steps. And the Find Requisition query will certainly show you your active requisitions that are already here. It can also be any historical requisitions that have been fully processed, and it can be any other requisitions that you're allowed to view as a user. So for example, if you are a department manager and you have the ability to view the requisitions for other users of your department, you can use this query here. So again, you always have the ability to go back in and find where your requisitions are, what has happened to them, what needs to happen to them as they flow through each step of the process. We're going to click on New Requisition, and we're going to spend a good bit of time here on this screen talking about the fields that are available on the requisition. So these are the fields that I have chosen to make available to this user to be able to view and enter information into. These are not all of the fields that are available. There are other fields like shipping method and payment terms that I have hidden from this particular user. And also, if I still have fields here on the screen that do not apply in your environment, maybe the user does not know the information, you don't want them to see the information, or they just typically do not enter the information, then you can hide these fields. If you hide fields, they are removed from the screen. The user cannot see them and will not even know that they're there. You can also make fields read-only. An example of a read-only field is ship to. You can view the information, but the field is grayed out. You cannot access it or change it. You can default values into fields. So, for example, site ID. If you always requisition for the same site ID, or if you do so most of the time, default that value in. That field's already populated, and you would not need to enter anything into that field unless you were going to requisition for a different site ID in that particular example. You've also got required fields. If you look up here towards the top of the screen, you see that item description and quantity have a red asterisk next to them. That indicates a required field, meaning you must enter information into those fields before you can successfully submit the requisition. And item description and quantity are actually the minimum required fields. So if all you knew as a requester is a description of what you want and the quantity, that's all you need to enter. Somebody else along the line can provide the additional information and the additional details before the purchase order could be created. So for a user, you can simplify this screen all the way down to just the item description and quantity fields, and that's all they need to be able to enter. Now, of course, you're probably going to have some other fields available like comments and attachments, requisition name, or even use a different type of shopping experience. But the point there is that these fields that are on the screen are highly configurable by user so that different users, depending upon who they are, what they do, or where they work within an organization, can have different access and different views to information when they come in to enter their requisitions. There's also quite a few fields on the screen that have magnifying glasses next to them. If you click on the magnifying glass to the right of the field, or if you double-click in the field to the left of the magnifying glass, you'll do a lookup to the source of information and be able to use that information when you come in to fill out your requisition. So fields like item and unit of measure, site ID, vendor, GL account, ship to, those correspond to the same setup of those fields within your back office, financial, or ERP system. They might be different names. Instead of vendor, it might be supplier. Instead of site ID, it might be location. And we correspond to those naming conventions of your back office system. But again, the fields that have magnifying glasses next to them are lookups and allow you to access another source of information. Along with those lookups, you can also restrict and control the information that's available as well. So you can limit a user to only have access to certain items or vendors or GL accounts. That way they cannot accidentally make a selection that you don't want them to be making, and they also do not need to search through unnecessary information in order to find what it is they're looking for. In addition to being able to configure the fields that are available to the user and the information that's available to the user on this screen, there's also different types of requisitions that you can have access to as well. We're going to be working with a requisition that is going to ultimately create a purchase order. So that's the type that we'll be using here in just a moment. But there's also a check request type of requisition. So if you're doing invoice automation and you want to be able to pay a vendor from their bill or from their invoice, you want to be able to route that request for approval and then ultimately create the transaction that can be paid. You can use a check request to do that. The check request does not create a PO. It creates a transaction in the back office financial or ERP system that can be paid so that you can make the payment to that vendor. You've also got an inventory replenishment type requisition. Depending upon the inventory system that you are using, you can generate a requisition that will look at the minimums, the maximums, and the order up 2 levels and create a requisition to replenish inventory to the needed levels. And then you've got a vendor contract type requisition, which allows you to set up and maintain contracts with vendors in order to enforce pricing or track spending with those vendors. So those are the different types of requisitions. They're going to be very similar in the look and feel that we're talking about here. It's primarily the end result that is different. So once you've seen one of them, you're going to get a good idea of how all of them work. But I just want you to know that there are different types of requisitions. So we're going to step back out here to our My Workplace tab, and we're going to use an internal catalog to generate some items on our requisition. An internal catalog is one that you set up and maintain for your users as a customer. In other words, you've gotten a download from your vendors, or you've manually entered the information onto the catalog, and it's your catalog that you've set up and maintained. You can import items into the catalog and maintain those catalogs in that manner. I have my internal catalogs broken out by vendor, but they could be broken out by department, and you could have a different icon with multiple vendors' items in that catalog. However you decide to set that catalog up, once you click on the icon, this is now the catalog that you're going to be able to shop from. This is my staples catalog, and I can categorize the items, I can search for items, I can see pictures and descriptions and pricing for items. So I've got these available to me to select from, and when I want to select one of the items, I add it to my cart. I could continue shopping, adding more items to my cart, either from the same catalog or other catalogs, and once I'm done shopping, I can use my shopping cart to create an order requisition. So this is using the typical shopping cart experience that many users should be familiar with. Amazon.com, BestBuy.com, in your day-to-day web experiences, you've probably used a shopping cart to create an order and get something online. This time you're using your shopping cart to create an order requisition, so there's that expanding file folder now on the requisition. If I had had more than one item in my cart, again from that same catalog or other catalogs, those would have been pulled in as well onto this requisition. You also have the concept of external catalogs. External catalogs is a process called punch-out. This is a module that we offer, and it allows you to shop a vendor's website and the catalogs that that vendor sets up and maintains for you as their customer. So an example I have of that is Office Depot. Click on Office Depot. That's now going to go out to the Office Depot website. So again, this is a site that Office Depot maintains for me as their customer. My items, my pricing, my catalogs that I'm going to be able to shop from to create a requisition. So obviously in your example, it'll be your items, your catalogs, your pricing that you can search for or use your menu options to go find office supplies, pens, ballpoint stick pens, and once you find the pens that you want, add those to your cart, and we'll say that we need just one of those for right now. Keep shopping, adding more items to our cart. When you're done shopping, check out, and when you check out, that item or items is now pulled into the requisition. There's our 1 dozen ballpoint stick pens that we requested from Office Depot. That order is not complete yet. That order will not be complete until a purchase order is created, and when the purchase order is created, it'll be sent electronically to the vendor. That will complete the transaction, and then they will ship you those items. You also have the concept of a shopping list to create requisitions. A shopping list is typically used for regularly requested items. So it's a monthly office supply order. It's a job, event, or project, or even vendor that we request from regularly. These lists can be set up by user, by department, or made available system-wide. If you have access to a list, you'll see it in the drop-down here. Click to select the list that you want to use, and here are the items that we typically request when we need something for a computer. So this time we're going to get 2 of those, 1 keyboard, 1 LaserJet printer. Enter quantities into those fields, load those items. Those 3 items are now loaded onto the requisition. You could shop other lists if needed to continue to add items to the requisition, but that's a quick and easy way, especially for regularly requested items, to be entered on the requisition. You can also import requisitions. You can import them in a CSV template format that we provide. You can duplicate requisitions, pull up a past requisition using your navigational buttons, your lookup, or your find requisition on the previous screen. Duplicate that requisition, make any changes, additions, or deletions, and then submit that requisition. You can also come into the body of the requisition, do a lookup on the item field. This does a lookup to the item master. This could be inventory items, but it does not have to be inventory items. It could simply be a list of items that you maintain to allow users to find and search through, and then once they get to the items that they want, they can select that, and that'll pull in the item number, the item description, the unit of measure, the last price. If you have a primary vendor, that's been pulled over as well, along with the default GL account code. So the more information set up in the item master, the more that can be pulled over. All I need to do is enter a quantity. I've met my required fields, and that's a valid line item on the requisition. And finally, down here at the bottom, if you cannot find what you're looking for in a catalog, in a shopping list, or in an item master, maybe it doesn't exist yet, or maybe you just can't find it, then type in what you need. And if you need some cleaning services and you need 2 hours of cleaning services, type that in. You've met the required fields, and that's a valid line item on the requisition. So again, those are several different ways to enter items on a requisition. In your environment, you might use one of those methods. You might use all of those methods, or different users might use different methods. It's up to you and how you're set up and configured based upon what functionality you have and make available to those users. So we can submit this requisition now. We've met the required fields for all of the items on the requisition. Now, it's important to note that some of these fields don't have a vendor and don't have a GL account code assigned for that particular line. But as you scroll down through some of these other lines, you see that they might have a vendor for them, they might have a GL account for them, or they might even have both pieces of information. It's very important to note that the General tab applies to the highlighted line on the requisition. So you can have different vendors, different GL accounts, different departments on this requisition. You don't have to make sure that everything on the requisition is for the same vendor and corresponds to the same PO. We're going to route these for approval, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes, by line item if you want to. And then ultimately, once they're fully approved, we're going to generate POs. And if the POs have the same vendor, then you can consolidate them onto the same purchase order. If they have different vendors from the requisition lines, they'll create different purchase orders. So there's a lot of flexibility and power in the ability to enter different information on the requisitions. Now, of course, if it's your policy to have all of your requisitions be for the same vendor, that's fine too. You can just enter them that way, but you're not restricted to that being a functionality that you must follow. Now, I've entered everything I needed to on the requisitions, and some line items have more than others. That's fine. But there's other details that we can add here as well to provide additional information on the requisition. So there's a requisition name field. You can name this requisition. So if everything on the requisition was for the same purpose, a monthly office supply order, a job, event, a project, a vendor, or the new office on the second floor, then type that in, and you've now named the requisition. At a glance, other users will know what this requisition is for. It's also a field that you can query and look up on as well. In addition to the requisition name, there's also comment fields for each line. There's a vendor comment where I could say I need these as soon as possible. That vendor comment can be viewed by any of the other users who have access to the requisition. That vendor comment can flow over to the purchase order and appear on the line item entry detail, and it can also print on the purchase order depending upon your setup. You've also got internal comments. Internal comments are typically used for additional information, longer descriptions, special instructions, or even justification of why you're making the request. So you can say that these are for the office that is next to the elevator, just down from the stairwell, whatever else it is that you need to say, and that's an internal comment to provide additional information for that line. Again, these are line item comments. If I move up here to my 1 gigahertz processor, you'll see that both the comment fields are blank, and I can have a totally different vendor comment as well as a totally different internal comment, And you'll also see that icons appear next to the line when there's a comment associated with them. You also have header comments up here on the upper right-hand side. Click there, select from predefined comments, or manually enter your own comments. These comments apply at a header level, meaning that they apply to the entire requisition. You'll also see blank paper clips next to each line and a blank paper clip up here on the upper right-hand side. Click on that blank paper clip, browse the drives that you have access to, select a Word document, a PDF file, an Excel spreadsheet, describe that, and attach that to the requisition. You see there's a couple of check boxes here. There's a PO attached checkbox. If I check that box, then if you are having the purchase orders automatically emailed to the vendor, then that attachment will go with it. There's also an RFQ checkbox. Request for quote allows you to send a requisition out for bid, and if you check that box, then that attachment will be available for the vendor to view when they go out to bid as requested. You've also got header attachments. Click up here, find that attachment that applies to the entire requisition, describe that, and attach that file. Again, you have your PO attach checkbox right there, and you'll also see that you can view related attachments. So I can click on the header attachments, and then I can see any attachments that are related to this requisition. And those related attachments will continue throughout the process if I attach more during the requisition or at the time of receiving and invoice matching. All right, so that's a requisition that has everything entered on it, and we've got some additional information and additional details put on that requisition as well. Before I submit this requisition, there's a couple of other things to point out. You've got analytical accounting functionality available where you can set up different analysis groups, dimensions, or codes to expand the use of your general ledger account. So rather than having to create a new GL account every time you want some different identifiers, such as maybe a project or a job that you want to indicate, then you can use analytical accounting information to have those dimensions and codes be available at the requisition line. You've also got GL distributions. GL distributions allows you to distribute an individual line on a requisition to multiple general ledger accounts. You can select from predefined distribution groups, or you can manually do your distributions by selecting the additional general ledger account codes that you want to use, and then by amount or percent, determining what it is that needs to be distributed and how, and then that's now a line that's been distributed to multiple GL accounts. You can see there's an icon that appears there. That's a little pie graph. That's how you know that that line has GL distributions. You also can do mass line changes. So if everything on the requisition needs to have the same value, like if you do want them all to have the same vendor or all the same site ID or priority or even GL account, then you can enter the values here, update, and close, and that will now put that value onto all items on that requisition. And that is requisition entry. Let's go ahead and submit this requisition, and we'll talk about the approval processes that are available as well. So when you submit a requisition, it'll route for approval based upon the details that have been entered on the requisition. There are unlimited levels of approval. There are unlimited approval paths. So you're going to make sure that these requisitions get fully approved before they're ever available to create a purchase order. And you can route for approval in many different ways. You can route for approval by the total amount of the entire requisition, which is all of our lines added together to give us this total. You can route for approval by the amount of the line. So it is possible that each line on the requisition could go to a different approver or through a different approval path. In addition to amounts, you can route by department, site ID, vendor, GL account, ship to, priority, item, item class, vendor class, the person's supervisor, and more. Again, there's unlimited levels of approval, unlimited approval paths. So you could route to the department manager because of the department. You could route to IT because it's computer hardware, computer software related. You could route to finance because of the amount. And as we'll see in a moment, you could route to the controller or the CFO based upon the budget. So we're still logged in as the requester. Everything we've done to this point has been as the requester. And as mentioned earlier, the requester can view the details for these line items. So click on Details down here below, and you're going to be able to see a status of the requisition line. You're going to see the approval path of the requisition line. And you can see that Lisa and Bob need to approve this requisition. Again, there's unlimited levels of approval. unlimited approval paths. So if there were more than 2 approvers, you'd see the entire list of approvers. The arrow and the bold print indicate the pending approver, which is who we're waiting on to approve this before it can move on through the process. You've also got alternate approvers. Alternates can approve in the place of the original approver, and if an alternate had been enabled or activated here, you would see who that was. You've also got budget information. We've got 4 or 5 different ways to budget within the workplace application. You can budget by general ledger account. You can budget by project or job. You can set up and maintain your own budgets. No matter how you set up the budgets, you have the ability to compare requisitions to those budgets, route for approval if you go over budget, and also get warnings if you're over budget as well that the requester can view and other users can view on their requisition details. So that's an example of what some of the data could look like if you're comparing these to the budgets. All right, you've also got a log down here at the bottom, which is date, time, user, and action of what is happening to this requisition. So you're always able to see where this requisition is, what has happened to it, what needs to happen to it as it's flowing through the process. All right, so that's requisition entry. We'll go ahead and close that window. We'll log out as this user. When you log out, we're going to send out email notifications that are going to go to the different users here. We've got an email notification that's going to go to our approver, letting them know that they have requisitions that are pending their approval. And here's that email. Now, you're going to have several options on your approvals. First off, there are links in the email. If you click on the links in the email, it'll take you into Workplace and allow you to approve or disapprove those items. You're also going to be able to reply to this email. If you reply to the email, you're going to be able to use these brackets here to approve or disapprove. So for example, if I put a Y into the bracket, I'm going to approve that item. If I put an N into the bracket, I'm going to disapprove that item. And I can also enter notes. So I could put an N in that bracket, and I could say, find a cheaper printer and resubmit. And when I submit this email or send this email, then those items will be approved or disapproved based upon what I indicated, and the notes will go in an email and also appear on the log that's going to go to the requester. So that's, again, the ability to approve or disapprove from within the email without having to go into the workplace application. We also have mobile approvals available. You can use mobile approvals to approve or disapprove these items as well. In addition to the ways to approve, there's also alerts that you can establish. So if an item has not been approved after a certain number of hours, 24, 36, whatever you determine is the number of hours needed, the user will get another email. It looks just like this, but it's a reminder that you have items that are pending your approval. All right, so let's go log in as Lisa. When you log in as Lisa, we're going to go into the actual browser-based approval. You can see that Lisa has 7 items pending approval. So in addition to the email notification that you get when you log in, you see how many items you need to approve. Click there, you'll get a load screen. The load screen allows you to be selective by these values, or if you leave those values blank and click on load, you'll load all items pending your approval. You load those items by requisition, expand the requisition that you want to work with. There's your comment indicator and your attachment indicator at the header level. There's your comment indicator, your attachment indicator, and your GL distributions indicator at the line level. So as an approver, I can see indications when there's additional information available on the requisition. I can also see my line details and my general tab as well, along with the comments that were entered. So I can use that information in order to make my decisions about what I'm going to do with these requisitions. Approvers can also be allowed to edit requisitions. You do not have to allow an approver to edit requisitions. You can just simply have them only be able to approve or disapprove. But if you do allow an approver to edit requisitions, they can come into the requisition and we can make a change or an addition. So we'll change the vendor in this example to the Attractive Telephone Company. That's now a change made on this requisition. There's a change log that will record that change, who made it, when they made it, what they changed it from, and what they changed it to. There's also a note to the requester right here. Click there, and you can enter a note, and you can tell them whatever you want to tell them, but in this example, we'll tell them that we changed the vendor to the attractive telephone company, and that goes in an email and also appears on the log for that item. When you're ready to process, you could approve all or disapprove all, which affects everything in this session. You could also approve or disapprove entire requisitions, whereas we're going to do here, we'll approve the first line, we'll approve the last line, we'll disapprove the $1,800 LaserJet printer, and again, we'll tell them to find a cheaper printer and resubmit. And then again, that note will go in an email and also appear on the log for that item. Process the session. Any items that are approved will go to the next approver in line if there is one. Any items that are fully approved will be available to create a PO, which is where we'll go next. And any items that are disapproved will go back to the original requester with those notes. And in this example, they could find a cheaper printer and resubmit. Last thing on approvers is alternates. Alternates can approve in the place of the original approver. If an alternate has been enabled or activated, they can get the same email notifications as the original approver. And as an approver, I can click here on this light switch, and I have now enabled my alternates. I'm not picking who they are. I'm simply enabling them so that they can approve in my place. I can also schedule my alternates. I can schedule them with from and to dates, and they can approve during those periods of time. And if I forget to enable my alternates or schedule my alternates, a system administrator can activate the alternates on my behalf. Alternates can again approve in the place of the original approver to keep items moving through the process. We'll log out as our approver. A couple more emails have gone out. When items are disapproved, you're notified that they're disapproved, why they were disapproved, and a link in that email. When items are approved, you're notified that they are approved. The details, the notes, and the links there as well, and both those emails go to the original requester. As the reviewer, which is the next user we're going to log in as, you're also notified that you have items that are pending your review with the details, the comments, the links there as well. So those are 3 more emails that can go out to the different users, keeping them up to date with what's going on as the items flow through the process. So let's go log in as my reviewer. My reviewer's name is Ben. We're going to log in as Ben, and you see that Ben's got 16 items pending review. You also see that there's some metrics available to Ben. We've got metrics that come with the system out of the box, and you can also create your own metrics with SQL Server queries to be able to show you some information on your dashboard right here on the screen. So I can see the top 5 vendors by year-to-date purchases. I can see the total purchases for the last 12 months. And again, there's others that can be used and created as well, provide you with a glance to information as soon as you log in. And these are controlled by user, so different users can have different metrics as they log in. So we'll click on our 16 items pending review, and we get a load screen. The load screen allows you to be selective by these values or ranges of those values. Leave them all blank. Click on load. You'll load all items pending your review. Expand the requisition that you want to work with, and here are the items that we can create purchase orders for. Now, a quick side note. You also have the ability to release items from inventory. So we won't do that in this particular demo, but just so you know, if you do maintain an on-hand stock of items and you want to be able to pick those items from stock and get them to the user rather than create a PO, then you would simply release those items in this particular example, and it would generate a pick list and also an inventory adjustment to remove those items from inventory. But again, we're going to stick with these items here and generate a purchase order. You can see the comment and the attachment indicators at the header, at the line. There's your GL distributions. You can view the line item information. You can view the general tab. And you see this user's got a lot more information available. The reviewer, again, is typically a buyer or a purchasing agent. So they should know or probably know more information and more details. If they don't, that's okay. We have customers where the reviewer is the original requester, and that's perfectly fine. But that's just the flexibility of having different fields available to different users. So we can come in here, and if we're missing a vendor, we obviously cannot create a PO. So we need to go in and select the vendor. Same with GL account, we need to go in and input that as well. We'll scroll through our items. We can add any information that is missing on these items, and we'll just make some different selections here. Once we're done, we can then choose what we want to order. Now you still have your note to the requester, so if you're going to order these 12-foot white phone cords, you could tell them that it will be there on Monday, and that note will go in an email and also appear on the log. Order all, which affects everything in this session. Order by requisition, or as we'll do in our example, let's order these first 3 lines, order that line there, leave this one on hold, meaning we'll come back to it later, and cancel this last line. If you cancel a line, use your note to the requester and tell them why you canceled it. Either type in that note, or you can use predefined notes like more information is required for that item. And that's the note that will go on an email and also appear on the log. Process this session, and you're now going to create the purchase orders real time. So it's going to take the fully approved requisitions and generate a purchase order. Now, sometimes the purchase orders are generated in the back office financial or ERP system. We also have our own back office, or excuse me, we have our own purchase order system as well. But no matter where the purchase orders are generated, you've taken the fully approved requisitions to create those POs, and then those POs don't have to be rekeyed or re-entered. They're going to be created from the transaction information that you've already got input and approved here. Now, once we create the purchase orders, there's different things that you can do. You can go into the purchase order system and print the purchase order, release it, and send it out to the vendor, and that's perfectly fine with us. You can go into that PO system and manage your purchase orders from this point forward. But you've also got the ability, as you can see here, to see what POs were generated. So those are the 4 POs that were generated from the single requisition. You've got the ability to view or print the purchase order. Click on View Print, go out and grab the purchase order information, and then now here is the purchase order in a PDF format that you could print or save, add logos, add terms and conditions, or even change the layout. And that is the purchase order that can be viewed or printed from within the workplace. You can also automatically email the purchase order to the vendor in a PDF format as well, and that's what this looks like. There's the PDF of the purchase order. There's those attachments that I said needed to go over with that as well, and that goes to the vendor based upon who you indicated it needed to go to. This last PO, number 2283, that is our punch-out purchase order. That's the one with Office Depot. So that did create the purchase order in the purchase order system, but it also sent the purchase order electronically to the vendor. That will complete the transaction, and then they will ship you those dozen ballpoint stick pins. So that's requisitioning all the way through the creation of a PO. A couple of more emails have gone out. When you process the session, an email went out to the requester telling them it was processed with the PO numbers, the comments, the notes, and the links there. When an item was canceled, an email can go out to the requester, letting them know it was canceled, and the note and the link there. So let's log out as this user, and let's go do receiving. Now I'm going to allow my original requester to receive one of their purchase orders. It doesn't have to be the original requester. It can be whoever you want it to be, but it's going to be a person designated in their security to be able to receive, and we're going to use auto receive for this particular user. So I'll click there on that receiving and matching tab. I'll do a new auto receive session. If you know the PO number, you can enter it. If you don't know the PO number, you can search for and find it. I'll load that PO, and here's my 40 12-foot white phone cords that I ordered. If you got all 40 of them, that's great. Leave the quantity shipped as 40. If you only got 30 of them, change the quantity shipped to 30. That'll leave the PO open with the remaining 10, and you can do a partial receipt. You've got comments that you can enter. You've got attachments, so you can attach a scanned image of the packing slip here, browse, find that packing slip, describe it, and attach that here. And then when you're ready to receive, click on the checkbox and click on Process, and you'll now receive that item. There are approval routing rules available with receiving, so you can route this for approval if there's any variances in the quantity or in the price. And we'll now have received that item as the original requester that created the, or that entered the requisition that created the PO. Now let's go do invoice matching. We're going to walk in as a different user, which is Phil, and do some invoice matching. So Phil has the ability to match an invoice to what we've already received. Now again, some of the back office systems that we integrate with, you could do this in that back office system. You don't necessarily have to do invoice matching in Workplace. The advantages to do it in Workplace are it's web-based, you don't have to be a user on the system to do it, and there's approvals with this as well. But again, it's not a requirement necessarily that you invoice match in Workplace. You may be able to do that in your back office system. But let's do a new receive match invoice session. Let's pick our vendor here, and then enter our vendor document number. And you can see that Phil's got different transaction types. He could do a shipment, which is the receipt of goods like we just did. He could do a shipment invoice, which receives and matches in the same step, or we'll do an invoice match in this example. Come up here and click on load, and you'll show all the POs that are available for this user to match. Select the one or ones that you want to use. You can select multiple POs. You can view the comments that were entered on the vendor comments. You can enter invoice comments. You can also enter them at a header level, and you can attach files. So attach a scanned image of that invoice. Browse, find that invoice, and attach it here. And now you can also see an example of what I mentioned earlier. There's all those related attachments that we've done before, and they're sitting there, and they're available to be seen when you click on the attachments here. When you're ready to process, click on Process. If it needed approval routings, then it would route for approval. But once it's been fully approved, or if it doesn't need approval, it'll create the invoice transaction over in the back office financial or ERP system, and then you'd obviously be able to process that and pay the vendor. So that is requisitioning all the way through invoice matching. Let's log out as this user. Let's log back in as our requester and look at a couple of other things. First off, you've got the Find Requisition lookup down here. Click there, and there's a lot of information that shows up. You've got the PO numbers. You've got whether or not it's been released or not. You've got item information, vendor information, and a status for each line. You can find and search through all of this information to get exactly the requisitions that you want. You can export this out to Excel. Click on Export, and it'll create a CSV template that you can then use there. And there's the CSV file that has been generated out in that particular example. And then that is the export of the Find Requisition screen. Now you can also use that Find Requisition to drill down and look up more details. Click there, and you can come in and view the details, and you're going to be able to see the status of the requisition, the purchasing status, which includes the PO, how many were ordered, shipped, invoiced, and matched to this point, purchasing information, so you can see the voucher number, the voucher date, the check number, the check date, and the amount paid, your budget information, and the log of submitted changes that were made, approved with notes, processed with notes, all the way through receipt and invoice. So that's the details of a fully processed requisition all the way through invoice matching. Now we also have the ability to cancel items on a PO. Again, this might be different depending upon your back office or financial system, but you could come into here. There's those 40 12-foot white phone cords that we ordered. We've obviously already received and matched 30 of them, and if we know we're not going to get the remaining 10, then you can put a 10 in there, submit that, and that'll cancel those remaining 10 on that purchase order. If it's canceled the remaining amount, then that'll close that purchase order out. So that's just additional functionality or other things that you can do within the Workplace application. So that is Workplace eProcurement, from requisition entry all the way through invoice matching and then canceling items on a PO. There are other modules that we have available, like Request for Quote, where you can take requisitions, send them out to bid to the vendor. The vendors can click on a link in an email and reply and populate the Request for Quote information. We also have vendor contracts, where you can set up and maintain contracts with the vendors in order to enforce pricing or track spending, and that's additional functionality that is available here as well. And then again, depending upon your back office or financial system, there could be other interfaces that are available too. We integrate to different project solutions. We integrate to different job costing solutions and many different budget applications that you can use to compare those requisitions to budgets. So if you want more details on any of those, if you have a specific need or a requirement, or you want to look more specifically at your back office financial ERP system and how Workplace interacts with that, then please let us know and we can do a one-on-one demo. So at this point, that concludes the eProcurement webinar. I do appreciate your time today. And again, please feel free to contact us if you have additional needs or additional questions. And at this point, I will open the floor for questions and spend the next few minutes answering those. But again, thank you very much for your time today.